Coming up, Dave's going to be distracted by the Asus ePad Transformer Prime. He's probably staring at it right now. Marco is going to tell you all about a nice new OCZ SSD. The Kindle Fire, let's talk about that. Plus, more contest details coming up.
The bar has been set wicked fast. It rocked in the benchmarks. We're going to up the ante a little bit.
Processing power, I kind of understand this. Welcome back to 2.5 Geeks. I'm Ayaz Akhtar alongside Dave Altavilla and Marco Chiappetta. How are you guys doing?
Nice, good, all that.
How about you, Marco?
I'm doing great. No complaints here.
I will complain because one of my hard drives just before we started recording died. I had to recreate something because I didn't have it any backup. You know, no backup, no RAID 1, no Carbonite, no Dropbox, no nothing.
Shame.
So I had to recreate stuff. Frantic. So if I seem ill-prepared for today's episode, you know why. Boy, do I feel pleasant today. Let's
back up early and often.
Yes, this will be the last time you ever hear me complain about that because this is going to be fixed very soon. Let's talk about something way more fun than me whining about a hard drive failure that I could have prevented. Let's talk about something awesome. The first, I believe, Tegra 3 powered tablet. And talk about the Asus ePad Transformer Prime. And this thing is the successor to the original Transformer, but it really looks astonishingly different. Dave, can you tell us about it?
I certainly can. So here it is, and I'll hold it up to the screen. It's going to cause havoc, I'm sure. It is remarkably thin, about 0.33 inches thick to be exact. It's thinner than an iPad 2IS.
That's fancy.
And this is the Transformer part of it. There's actually a keyboard dock that it mates up with. And yeah, this thing's pretty sleek in that it's thin, light, beautiful, but comes equipped with some serious horsepower under the hood. It has a Tegra 3 system on a chip, as we like to call it. It's really not a processor. It's the entire system on a chip. If you will. Well, not quite the entire. You know, you got to add some RAM and some storage and all that good stuff. But yeah, it's NVIDIA's Tegra 3 SoC with a quad-core ARM9 CPU and a 12-core NVIDIA graphics GPU on board.
Now, I know you actually did some benchmarks on this, and I think it beat pretty much every Tegra 2 out there, and it beat the Apple A5 in some tests. Can you tell us about that?
It did. You know, it really depends on what you're looking at from a performance metric. When you look at things like our SunSpider test, you know, Apple's iPad 2 came in a little bit faster. That's a test that's optimized for JavaScript processing, you know, web-based JavaScript processing. But if you look at things like BrowserMark, which is indicative of not only the hardware, plus the browser performance itself, the actual Android, in this case Android 3.2 on the Transformer Prime, Android browser versus the iOS browser, Safari, actually just edged out the iPad 2 in that metric. And then when you talk about gaming, in a couple of our tests, you know, it's kind of funny. I mean, it depends on, again, what angle you're looking at it from. If you're looking at just raw frame rate, we have a test called that we use called GL Benchmark Egypt, which is basically a game scene and setting. The setting is Egypt, and it outscored the iPad 2 substantially, 61 frames per second, 61.5 frames per second versus 49 frames per second on the iPad 2. Where the iPad 2 actually showed a little bit more muscle was texture fill rate. So potentially as games get more texture intensive on tablets, the iPad 2 may have some advantage there. But the GL benchmark Egypt test that we did really shows the polygon throughput, the actual processing throughput of Tegra 3 graphics core. So no question about it, a real strong platform that in some cases can certainly outmuscle an iPad 2, especially when you're talking about things like multitasking. heavy multitasking. Obviously, you've got a quad-core processor here versus the iPad 2's A5, dual-core. And, yeah, so lots of muscle under the hood. $499 for the 32 gig, $599 for the 64 gig version of this. And that's just Slate only. The dock, the keyboard dock, is $150 extra option. But $100 less on average than an iPad 2 as well, so not too bad.
So Dave, this thing's got a laptop dock. Does it really add a lot of functionality to a tablet? I mean, considering tablets are really all touchscreen, what good could having a keyboard with a trackpad be?
Well, you know, it depends on your usage model. If you're the type that wants to just grab your tablet on the couch or perhaps do a little light bedtime reading or something like that, probably not a lot. However, if you find yourself doing a lot of email, obviously, tapping on that glass isn't exactly the most comfortable experience. And, you know, this is the dock here. Again, super light and thin in and of itself. You know, chiclet style netbook keyboard, nice, rather large 2-button touchpad here. The other thing that you get with this is another sync and charge port, obviously, here, because once you plug it into the slot, you lose that connection up top in the dock. But you also get full-size SD card slot and a full-size USB port. So if you want to hang some storage off this thing, get files on and off your tablet easier, certainly there's definitely a lot more accessibility with the keyboard dock in tow. So I think it's worth it. But, you know, if you're really just looking at the tablet as a consumption device versus content, or not so much content creation, but an email or a work device at all, you know, it depends on your usage model, I guess.
Marco, you got anything you want to say about this tablet?
I just wanted to mention something about its performance and the ice cream sandwich update that's coming. I read recently that the Transformer Prime was actually the platform development vehicle for ice cream sandwich, so you can definitely expect that update to roll out and for it to be fairly robust. And I'd also wager that performance is going to be much better. I've been experimenting with some ROMs on a Samsung Galaxy S2, and with the latest builds of CyanogenMod, my browser mark and SunSpider scores on this dual core blow everything away. That was in our Transformer Prime article, so expect huge performance gains on the software front when the ice cream sandwich comes for that thing.
Let's talk about a hard drive that would never ever make the click of doom because it's an SSD. From OCZ, the Octane Series SATA 3. It's an SSD. You guys reviewed it. I know it can't make the clicking because the clicking sound is when it's trying to read the actual platters on the drive, and there's that little head, and it's trying to move. So if I had an SSD like this one, we're going to be talking about in a second, it would just be the silent thing. I wouldn't have that horrible, heart-wrenching moment where you hear click.
But,
right. Instead of clicking and throwing it in your face, it would be silent but deadly.
The vast sound of nothing.
It would be SBD.
So could you tell us about this drive that I assume actually worked?
It actually did work. It worked very well. We tested a 512 gig OCZ Octane SSD, and what's interesting about this drive is it's the first drive that features basically all OCZ technology. They bought Indalinks a few months ago, and this drive features a new Indalinks controller and basically firmware that's technically developed completely in-house because all the Indalinks folks are now under the OCZ banner. So it's a new high-end drive that we found read performance to be very competitive with some of the fastest drives out there, and due to the architecture of the controller, the performance is not dependent on the data type. So incompressible and compressible data was similar across both workloads. Performance stays fairly flat. Write performance was good. It was better than the Marvell-based drives we've tested, like the Intel 510 or the Crucial M4. Not quite as good as the Samsung or Sandforce-based drives. So performance is good across the board. Boot times were very good. Reads are very good. writes are good, but not quite on par with the fastest drives that are out there.
Now, how is it for, I guess, like per pound? If you're actually paying for this thing per gig, how does it? Are you getting your money's worth with something like this, or does it seem like? Pound. Yeah, is this the best pound for pound SSD? I guess gig for gig would be the term.
There you
go. So tough to say. So in terms of cost per gigabyte, the drive we tested was competitive. I think it was something like $1.70 something per gigabyte for the 512 gig drive we tested. Retail cost was $8.79. But there's a gotcha there. All of the review samples that went out were 512 gig drives that offer much faster writes than the smaller drives, the 128 and 256 gig drives, which are 200 and 369 respectively. Their write speeds are rated much lower, somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 megs a second lower. So if you're going for a large capacity drive, because we tested it, I can say, yeah, it's worth the money. It's a good drive, and as long as OCZ's track record is good with this new controller, yeah, it's solid. It's a solid offering. I haven't tested the slower drives, but their write performance are most certainly going to be worse than competing drives. So it's tough to say with those models.
Well, if you want the best bang for your buck, you might be looking, especially in tablets, you might be looking at the Kindle Fire. Now, whether you want to look at it as it has a lot of storage because it has access to that Amazon cloud, or it has very little onboard storage, it's 8 gigabytes local, you could look at it either way. I know Hot Hardware did a pretty in-depth look at the Kindle Fire. I think Paul Lilly wrote it. Dave, can you tell us about that?
Yes, I can tell you about that. And our buddy Paul took this thing for a test drive, and on a certain level, it's definitely got a ton of merit. $199 device, so cheap. And of course, Amazon is financing this thing based on the expectation that you'll consume some of their services. And whether you talk about the Amazon MP3, the Amazon Market for apps, or cloud storage, what have you, that Amazon offers, that's how they get to this price point. And when you look at the thing from a hardware standpoint, at least comparatively to what we've seen from other tablets in the market, 7-inch tablets in the market, it's very competitively priced. You've got a 1 gigahertz dual core TI OMAP 4 processor under the hood with Power VR SGX 540 graphics, so a nice processor. 512 mega RAM, little skimpy on the RAM, but not too bad. 8 gig of internal storage, again, light in the storage, but you're talking about Amazon here. Why would they put a ton of storage on this tablet? Because they want you to go to the cloud, right? 802.11 BGN wireless, and a gorgeous 7-inch IPS display. Really nice display, capacitive touch display. And so when you think about what Amazon has at hand here, no pun intended, with this device, you think about the ecosystem that is Amazon. If there's anybody that competes, that could compete, I should say, with Apple's iPad, it's these guys. And when you think about the cloud infrastructure that they have, whether it be Amazon MP3, all of their Amazon storage, cloud storage services that they offer, Amazon Shopping, right? I mean, these are their core competencies. And now you've got a tablet, of course, Kindle, right? Their e-reader. You've got these 3 tiers that are just huge in terms of providing the ecosystem and the media and the platform to support this tablet with an unbelievably good experience. Unfortunately, they fell a little bit short in some areas. This thing is closed off a little bit. It feels a little Apple-like in the way they approached it. And there's no access to the Android market, and obviously they'd have to pay royalties or some sort of licensing fee to the folks at Google for that. And they want you to come to the Amazon market, right? The Amazon app market. But a good first effort. We just expected a little bit more.
I think first effort's a really good way to describe this, because there are certain other points that it doesn't have like an expansion port. You can't put in micro SD or regular SD cards in there. No HDMI output. So if you really love the Kindle experience, the Kindle Fire experience, you can't just like send it to your television. I mean, I see what Amazon's doing there. I mean, how do you feel about some of these limitations about this first generation product? Because I'm very skeptical of first gen products because that second rev is usually pretty dead on. Remember the original Kindle? That thing was hideous, but functionally it was pretty good. The second version, way better. What do you expect Amazon's, I guess, second attempt to be like?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think they're going to take a lot of the feedback that they're getting from the press and guys like us and end users, and they're going to internalize that and develop a product that overcomes some of these shortcomings. I mean, not having access to the I/O options that you spoke of. I mean, these are huge shortcomings. No micro SD card slot, no HDMI, no camera. HDMI, maybe not so much. I mean, you could maybe forgive them for that. The web browser experience, the Amazon Silk web browser, they talked about this cloud-infused browsing experience, right? How it would be, performance-wise, so much better, and save on bandwidth and all this stuff. It wasn't there. The browser experience was choppy. It seemed like they're very much set up to succeed. They have an ecosystem in place, an infrastructure in place to do very well in this space, it's like the Kindle. It's exactly like you said. And another iteration or two of this device, and you could see a real home run here. I think a 10-inch slate on the next rev is probably the way to go, and I think that's probably in the works. I mean, let's face it, a little bit larger screen and you capture a little bit more interest in the market, I think. But yeah, I think their next effort is probably going to be a pretty impressive device. For now, Paul entitled the article Amazon's Kindle Fire: Insight and How Not to Get Burned. You gotta understand up front what this thing can and can't do, and there's some limitations with the current iteration of the incarnation, I should say, of the Kindle Fire.
Now, Marco, I'm going to need your help for the next one because this is one of the topics I didn't get to read too much about, but it's about the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 560. Now, based on the number, it doesn't sound like it's the top of the line because it doesn't have 4 numbers. That's as far as I could go with this. Could you tell me about it?
Sure. So it's actually the GeForce GTX 560 Ti 448 core limited edition. That's the full name of the card.
Oh, excuse me.
So easy for you to say.
Yeah. So the name kind of says it all. The original 560 Ti was a 384 core GPU, released a few months back based on the GF 114 processor. Now, this card is actually powered by the GF 110. It's the same chip that's on the GeForce GTX 580 and 570, but it's one bin lower. One SM has been shut off, so there's fewer cores. There's 448 cores rather than the full complement of 512 that you'd see in a GeForce GTX 580. NVIDIA basically had a batch of GPUs that ran at the speed of a GTX 570, but they couldn't enable all of the shader cores. They couldn't enable all the shader cores on the GPU and have them work, so they fuse off an SM. They have a lower-end chip that's still pretty fast, so they come out with a limited edition card. And I think the timing is what's really smart on this thing. There are a bunch of awesome PC games that just shipped. It's actually a really hot season for PC gaming. Battlefield 3, Batman Arkham City, Modern Warfare 3, Skyrim, a bunch of really hot games. So NVIDIA's like, hey, here's this fast limited edition GPU just in time for the holidays. Check it out, and it'll run all these games really well. And it's fairly affordable. It is an upper mid-range GPU, so you're talking $290 on up, depending on the card configuration. But we found performance to be really good. It's faster than a Radeon 6950, basically across the board, and it trades victories with a 6970 for under $300. So it seems like a really decent card.
Now, unfortunately, you don't seem to have one in your hands. Could you explain how massive this thing is? I'm taking a look at the pictures right now. Looks like it's a dual height card. Has lots and lots of outputs.
It's actually not massive.
Really?
It's within reach if I stand up for a second.
Oh yeah, go for it.
You know what? Actually, I'm plugged in. I can't stand up. It's not that big actually. Some of the biggest graphics cards out there right now are 10.5, 11 inches long. This card was only I believe it was 8.5 inches. It's definitely not quite as long, and it's the standard double slot width, 2 slots wide, just like most of the other high-end graphics cards out there right now.
Well, I guess it's all about scale. I mean, it's still a massive looking, at least in the images I'm seeing.
So many jokes there, but
I know.
you
said it's not as big as the 10-inch ones. I decided to leave that alone. Let's leave all of that stuff alone.
Images in the mirror are closer than they appear. What?
Do not. Hey Dave, how about that contest? How about that giveaway you guys are working on, or actually not working on? You're actually doing right now.
Yeah, we actually just concluded our Giving Thanks sweepstakes for the Thanksgiving holiday. And Manda in our forum, she is the lucky winner. The PC Audio Labs Rockbox is on its merry way up to the Great White North. Manda's from Canada. So, another lucky winner has been awarded, and we have rolled out yet another contest. The MSI and NVIDIA Gear Up with Hot Hardware giveaway, the Gear Up giveaway. And we've got 3 prizes for 3 lucky winners. Or I'm sorry, Marco, how did we structure this? We get 2 winners, right? Sorry. 2 winners.
Right. Yes, 2.
Right. And an option for one of those winners on which motherboard you want. 3 prizes technically available. Graphics card is a grand prize, and it is an MSI N580 GTX Lightning graphics card. This is a super high-end graphics card, NVIDIA's top pixel-pushing powerhouse. And then another grand prize, our second grand prize, is either an MSI X79A GD65 motherboard, so X79 chipset with the new Sandy Bridge E Intel platform, Intel's fastest platform for the power user, or the MSI Z68A GD65 motherboard, which is a Z68 Sandy Bridge, first-gen Sandy Bridge motherboard. So depending on, as a winner, the winner of the motherboard, what you prefer, you can take your pick of either one of those 2 motherboards to build your next badass system with.
Now, obviously, all the details for the contest and everything we talked about are available at HotHardware.com. That's obviously true, right? And you didn't do something crazy, like put your content everywhere on the web, did you?
I did. We did.
You guys did. You put Hot Hardware, I think, in lots of sites. I'm just going to make up a bunch of them. If you wanted to check out Hot Hardware around the web, you can check out dig.com/ I bet it's Hot Hardware, right? Is it /Hot Hardware? Yeah.
It is. Yep.
Twitter.com / Hot Hardware. Facebook.com / Hot Hardware. On YouTube, I'm going to say you guys did something different. YouTube.com / Hot Hardware Vids.
Got a little crazy there.
Got to definitely ask something, though. Is there a Google Plus page?
There is.
Google Plus. So do a search for Hot Hardware, because I think it would be like plus.google.com / some horrible 11-character string, which is not
It's a little funky.
Yeah.
We need to learn how to pipe in our stories to Google Plus. Don't know how to do that yet.
We'll work on that. You'll see the +1s on everything. You can +1 everything you saw right there on that site soon. So that pretty much wraps up this episode of 2.5 Geeks. Thank you for stopping by and dealing with all my complaining.
It's okay. We love you.